Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for giving up your first Wednesday of October to be with us. We mixing it up a little bit for those that have been at our face-to-face offerings within the past few months. Our speakers will be joining us on Zoom. So we look forward to a good experience. This will be an interactive session. We'll be using breakout rooms. So for those in person, your table will serve as your breakout room, and we'll ask for the spokesperson to report back on the mic. And then for those virtual, we'll do the Zoom breakout room assignments similar to what we've done in past meetings this year. We are recording this session. Your name will only be captured if you come off of mute. So if you don't intend to talk and stay muted, you won't be in the recording. And if you have a question for our distinguished speakers, that's your way of opting in to being included in the recording. Okay, exciting news for the chapter. Elections are here again. So we know down south in Virginia, we have a governor election. This year we have a presidential election for our chapter. Almost as important. We opened up the nomination window online today. There's a couple of quick data fields to fill out. We're probably going to close that on the 27th, so PMI Global can set up the electronic election, and we'll have some type of election ritual at the November meeting. Positions up for election this year, and our president, you must have prior chapter officer experience for that. The co-vice president of programs, so to be a part of our great program team that really assesses what education you've already gotten this year and gets our great slate of speakers, 90% of which are donating their times outside of symposiums. So that sales pitch that that role gives is very important in the relationships they forge. The vice president of membership to make sure all our members receive a warm hello and a grateful goodbye if they do leave. And then the vice president of communications that deals with more of the technology side of the house. So that'll be in the newsletter that goes out this week with the recap from this evening's meeting. And it's been a weird year and a half. Philanthropies kind of look differently, but as we come out of the winter season into 2022, I think more people are reinvigorated to give back and volunteer. With that in mind, we're joined tonight by Ms. Beth May, who's one of the leaders of Project Management for Change, and she'll also speak of a volunteer opportunity.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. So every year, starting around this time, usually a little bit later, November or so, I talk about the Project Management Day of Service. And in fact, that is important, and we will be doing it again this year. It will be virtual again this year, so please hold the date, Saturday, February 19th. But and registration will open in December. But more importantly, PM for Change has launched its Continuous Value Delivery, CVD program. And the idea is to provide the same kind of pro bono project management support to local nonprofits all year round, not just on the day of service. And we do this typically in 3-month engagements with small teams of PMs, 1 to 3 PMs on average per nonprofit engagement. I believe we currently have 12 active engagements, which is awesome. We're helping a lot of nonprofits, but that means we need more project management volunteers. So this is a volunteer activity. You can get PDUs in the volunteer category. And what's more, you're having the opportunity to work with others, including nonprofits who are very passionate about their causes. You get to practice skills that you might not get to do in your day-to-day job. You get to learn new skills, expand your network. There's almost no downside. The only downside is it takes a little bit of your time. Other than that, there's really no downside to being a PM helping a nonprofit. So if you're interested, please contact us. You can go to our website, www.pm4change.org, or you can contact me, Beth May. I'm actually beth.may@pm4change.org, or just come see me after dinner. I'll hang out. So hopefully some of you will be interested in helping our nonprofits through the PM for Change continuous value delivery program. And whether you are not interested in that, please also watch for registration to open for the next Project Management Day of Service. Thanks.
And for those virtually, we'll have a blurb on that in our newsletter as well with her contact information. Yep. Okay. Even though a few of our board members are online, a few are here in the building, we're all looking forward to finishing up our respective terms for those who expire this year.
No, don't punch, guys.
Okay. Since we came back in the summer, we've been offering a $10 dinner special for all of our members. For those longtime chapter members of tradition since our inception in 2004, and something our president, Mr. Geis, highly believes in is that we're all about the members. So every November, it's our member appreciation dinner. That's a free dinner. We understand the comfort level of some with the pandemic and the Delta variant still hovering over us isn't for everyone, but we will, our great program team is wrapping up the finalizations for our speaker, and we'll be opening up that registration hopefully by the end of next week. So that'll be the first Wednesday in November. The entrees are traditionally always a filet mignon, crab cakes, or grilled chicken breasts. So in pre-pandemic years, we had the entire Normandy Farm restaurant in Potomac rented out. If there was a seat, there was somebody there to take the thanks back from us board members for being a member of our chapter. So more to come on that, but we hope to see as many of you as feel comfortable. And no, we're not offering takeout or gift cards. So unfortunately, not this year. Okay, for a few, by a show of hands, has anybody participated in the PMI Global Virtual Experience Series today? And those virtually on chat? Okay, so that was a free offering for PMI Global today and tomorrow. So probably too late to register, but we've gotten a lot of good feedback. That was great that PMI Global made that free for everyone. Seminars World will come at a cost, but that'll be next week from the 11th to the 14th. Dr. Martins, who's been a past presenter.
Reggie, no punching.
1 second. Leadership techniques, Lisa and David, who are doing great in Delaware. And then Mr. Bruce Gay, who's presented in the past and is one of the design thinking experts within the project management community. Hey, another PMI Global offering is Strategy at Work. They're working with Brightline on that. That'll be later in the month, the 28th and 29th, at the price of $125 for PMI members. That's a little bit more on the business side of how to really transform your workforce strategically. So there are some leaders with PMI Global, but you'll be joined by CEOs from Fortune 500 companies, professors from Ivy League and distinguished schools. So a little bit different than what PMI's offered in the past, but they're really trying to adapt to how project management is being done today and what transformation looks like in the 21st century. So both great opportunities. Those will be in the newsletter that you'll receive probably Friday.
Yeah. Reggie? No, please no.
Yeah. Okay, our education partners are still doing great things. many of them virtually. Lisa and David out of Delaware, Carl Pritchard with Pritchard Management Associates, Joe Liani with Project Management Experts. Our education calendar on the website has all those options. So, yep. Check out our website for those, and we'll also try to put spotlights on there on the newsletter from now. Okay, now for the main event of the evening, we're honored and gracious to have the founders and co-owners of Predictive Potential. Myself being a federal government employee, within the past 5 years, we've really invested in analytics and using Tableau and Informatica and more data-driven decisions. And project management's really going towards that way too. So tonight we're going to hear about how to look at our team development and our leadership by way of analytics. Ms. Germaine Watts is a Success Finder practitioner. She's written a great user guide on management systems for organizations, and her partner, Ms. Geri Canty, is a leadership coach, certified in ProSci and Success Finder, and has a real diverse PM background. A lot of times with jobs, we're looking for somebody in healthcare, somebody in IT, and Ms. Canty has like all those experiences packaged into one and has worked all around the world. So we're honored to have them. As we switch screen share, please give us 1 or 2 minutes and we'll start back up. And a reminder, if everyone can make sure you're muted if you don't have an active question. Thank you. Ladies, do you want to do a quick sound check?
I'm on.
Hello, I'm on.
So I'm seeing you, Geri.
Okay, so can folks see my screen now?
There we go. Yep.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and I hope you're all doing well. Germaine and I would like to thank the Montgomery County PMI board members for the opportunity to present tonight. And a special call out to Scott and Matt, who have worked with us to get us set up with our poll and all the logistics tonight. They've been really helpful. Germaine and I will present tonight a new method for creating, designing essentially high performance teams. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what we do at Predictive Potential. We focus on the needs of 3 groups. At an individual level, using predictive behavior analytics, we match people with the right careers and professional growth development needs to progress. We design and diagnose teams using aggregated behavioral analytics, our topic for tonight, and organizational design based on strategic direction requirements. I have this quote by Simon Sinek because it feels like as PMs today, we're being asked to make the impossible happen. So as Simon Sinek says, we can achieve the impossible by focusing on our own strengths and leaning into the strengths of our team members and colleagues. Our working reality today in my coaching practice, or in our coaching practice, we focus on helping individuals and teams thrive in today's reality. The team, just think of a team on the left, it's really in survival mode, with people being required to do things faster and faster, and sometimes without the right tools, required to be available practically 24/7 now. Members being sick and suffering from burnout, being in survival mode and not getting executive support. Though this list of items is definitely about stress. So when people are in survival mode, in stress, from a neuroscience perspective, you're in the sympathetic nervous system, meaning you're in a state of fight or flight. As soon as you go into this stress mode, you start to close down and become cognitively, perceptually, and emotionally impaired. As an example, this is what happens in people when they're resisting change, as I'm sure you're experiencing in your projects. Research shows that typically our peripheral vision is between 180 and 210 degrees. During stress arousal, peripheral vision goes down to 30%. We want our teams to have the right hand, we want our teams to have the right-hand side experience where they are in thrive mode. To thrive, we want to be in the parasympathetic nervous system, the renewal, what they call the renewal mode, thinking about possibilities versus problems, optimism versus pessimism, and resonant versus dissonant relationships. I'm excited to learn from the 2021 Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends, which is published every year, about what the trends are in organizations around for people. That now they are focusing on having teams formed based on worker preferences, working styles, and personal needs. And you will see that that is part of what we talk about tonight with the behavioral analytics. Also, project managers that model and prioritize well-being behaviors is going to be important. Team members are fostering well-being in relationships among colleagues. Teams in this high-performance mode are thriving, learning, and resilient, and have executive support. I think this is you, Germaine.
So what we would like to do this evening is to explore 3 propositions with you. The first of these is that there are 3 things needed for high team performance. The first of these you're probably pretty familiar with, having the right tools, resources, and organizational support to be able to do what it is that you are being asked to do. The second is having the right knowledge, skills, and organizational experience in order to be oriented, to be able to connect with the people that are needed, and to be able to bring the level of understanding to the circumstance. And the third is having the right range of behavioral propensities to meet the functionality requirements of the team's mandate and context. We're pretty sure that you know a lot about items 1 and 2. And so what we really kind of want to do this evening is to laser in on number 3, to explore this idea of behavioral propensities and functionality requirements and how you can really understand more about teams from this perspective. So what I'd like to do is to put a question out there to everyone, maybe just to kind of get us going. And that's really a fairly straightforward question. Do you believe that you can be or do anything that you would like to or that you can imagine? Take a moment and to just think about that and, you know, tell us what do you believe? Yes or no? How many people believe, yes, I can? I didn't hear that.
I think, Germaine, the poll will go up next.
Yeah, I'm seeing quite a few in chat, sort of in terms of the yes or no. About 50% are here at the restaurant. So where are we? To become a high performing. Okay, so I'm not sure I fully see this. So the bottom line is that you know, we tend to think we can do a lot of things, but there's little question that some things come to us a lot easier than others. And what really, in a way, makes the difference is both our interest in it, our level of passion, and the other is a question of our natural suitability for it. Malcolm Gladwell suggested that if we spent 10,000 hours, we could probably master absolutely anything. The point being, most of us might be reluctant to bring 10,000 hours to something that we found dismally boring and had no suitability for. So whether in fact we would persevere is a big question. To really understand why this is important, I want to actually ask a more specific question. So let's imagine that we had, for example, a statistician, right? And so the question here is A or B, first or second. Do you need to learn about statistical concepts, methods, and packages, and you will need to have experience performing statistical analyses to hone your skills? Do you believe that that is what is essential for being a high-performing statistician? Or do you believe that you require a strong capacity to reason with numbers, meaning a quantitative orientation, to think systematically, break things down logically to see patterns, which is analysis, and arrive at practical interpretations, which is common sense? What do you believe, A or B?
Do we have a show of hands? I'm unable to see because of the way the presentation is, but do we have a show of hands in the room?
At rest, many both options. I think we're seeing a bit of A and I'm seeing a bit of B. From A. So we're seeing a bit of a combination, right? The reality is that we need both. If I'm trying to learn the statistical concepts, you know, the methods, the computer packages, all of those things, and to gain the experience, with basically performing statistical analyses, I actually need B, the behavioral component. I need the capacity to reason with numbers. For all those who may be quantitatively challenged, not everybody has that. Or having a really strong analytic capability is what allows me to recognize patterns in those numbers and to ask right questions. So it isn't really an either or, it is in reality both. So for someone to become a high-performing statistician, if they have strong critical reasoning as a behavioral base, learning acquiring the knowledge and learning to apply that knowledge into practice becomes an easy thing. The other way around, if I don't have that behavioral and cognitive capability, the statistical packages, etc., won't really help me. You want to go to the next one, Geri? The bottom line out of that is really to say that we can't really do these two pieces independently. Our high performance actually, I will call it, rides on and relies on our behavioral preferences. So the second proposition that I want to kind of put out to you is that the same principle applies to teams. What that really means is that teams need basically several people to kind of pull together synergistically to do a wider range of things than what a single individual typically tries to do alone. And as we all know, that's not such an easy dance. Watch synchronized swimmers to really see how hard that is. And for a high performing team, we need them to flex between a number of different ways of reasoning, relating to others, and acting to fulfill their mandates. So if we thought about that high-performing statistician who needs to be able to flex between analytic thinking and quantitative thinking, pragmatic thinking, when we go to a team, we kind of have a higher unit order of productivity, and there's a similar but more challenging emphasis on how can that group of people cohesively flex the way they reason, the way they relate, and the way they act. Can you go to the next slide, Geri? So let's take a second example here in terms of a marketing team. The marketing team needs to be able to A, conduct market research, gather and analyze data for patterns and trends, maybe conduct focus groups or administer surveys to gain an understanding of what is wanted and needed and what will sell at what price points. So that's one aspect of the role, and it relies heavily on that critical quantitative reasoning that we've been exploring with the statistician. But that's actually not all that they require. They also require a strong innovative and intuitive thinking capacity so they can generate novel ideas that are likely to appeal to the client and to the client's customers. And they need to be able to sustain that kind of iterative creative process for a longer period of time to be able to really refine something to the point that they have a saleable, here it is, it's workable, it's viable, and it's a fully realized idea, an advertising campaign, for example. And that innovative, intuitive insight is a completely different way of processing. It's a different part of the brain. It's a different way of generating possible ideas. One is working with sort of sense data, concrete data, quantitative factual data. The other one is essentially drawing things from the non-concrete and bringing those ideas forward. And we can think of those things as a team needing to flex between different, what we call functionalities, the ability to perform an activity or to fulfill a particular purpose.
Okay, so the good news is that predictive behavioral analytics can help us anticipate how well individuals and teams will be able to demonstrate different functionalities. That's the capacity to perform an activity or fulfill an intended purpose. For individuals, it is possible to gather information on their traits and interests and to predict their suitability for different types of careers and work. For teams, the behavioral preferences data of individuals can be aggregated to get a sense of a group's strengths and blind spots, including how they will be able to pull together and function as a team.
So that brings us to my third proposition. And that really is that there are 9 core functionalities that teams are very, very often required to demonstrate. Starting with performing as a cohesive group, meaning to be able to work interdependently and in a coordinated, collaborating fashion. Secondly, to bring about significant or substantial change, to introduce change. Third, to get a message across to one or more intended audiences, to build social networks, to build sort of the outreach networks, to create something completely novel, to conceive a new idea, a new campaign, a new direction, a new whatever, to lead and influence others, shape their behaviors, to shape their buy-in to something, to monitor and manage progress, to be able to formulate a strategy that thinks about chunks that need to happen over a period of time to achieve a future state, and to demonstrate rapid adaptiveness. And coming up with these 9 core functionalities, I do have the benefit of being able to tap into almost 40 years of workplace research that tells us that groups are frequently asked and tasked to be able to flex across this range of functionalities. As you might expect, these functionalities, each of them requires different behavioral strengths to do. So for example, performing as a cohesive group requires a capacity to envision someone to be a torchbearer. This is what we are about. To be able to build consensus, agreement among a variety of people to say this team that we are sticking together and we can cohere around this. To be able to make decisions to say this is in and this is out of scope, and for everyone to kind of accept and work around that. To focus on the result that's supposed to be accomplished, regardless of some of the pressures that may be coming at the group or the hurdles that the group might have, and at the same time to continue being able to embrace change. When a group of people has those 5 strengths, competencies strongly demonstrated or represented in the group is very likely going to be able to perform as a cohesive team. The same is true for each of these others in terms of there being a range of behavioral preferences that individuals bring to a team that when we aggregate them up, make each of these different of these 9 functionalities possible.
Did you want to mention about the marketing team, Germaine?
Well, in terms of the
Yeah.
marketing, in terms of the marketing, what we kind of saw in that regard is 2 very distinct functionalities in terms of being able to carry out that creating of something completely novel, and at the same time being able to really formulate and push a strategy. Being able to do some of the quantitative, analytic, and pragmatic work of monitoring and managing, right? What is it that is actually wanted and needed? So the team, in fact, was demonstrating a range of things in addition to, or needs to be able to demonstrate a range of things in addition to being a cohesive group.
Okay, so today we know leaders and executives are looking for teams at all levels of of an organization to demonstrate rapid adaptiveness so they can compete in markets where we know change is constant. A team will need behavioral strengths, and you'll see in a minute what we mean around the score of 60 plus range in the following 6 behavioral competencies in order to be able to demonstrate rapid adaptiveness. So the first one is sustains profitability. This is made up of 3 different traits that are, wealth, risk-taking, and profit awareness. And it's about the capacity to use numbers and financial reasoning for gain seeking. The next one is seeks innovation. This is about intuition, innovation, reflectiveness. These are the traits that make up this competency. And it's about the desire to pursue novelty, different ideas, and untried options, conceiving of new. The next one then is embraces change. So the traits that make this one up are flexibility, risk-taking, and delegation. So this is about the willingness to actively sense outward of what needs to change. So our next one is tribes in chaos, which I'm sure a lot of you are possibly doing these days. Is about efficiency, operating informally, and being on the go. So this is the ability to multitask and emphasize efficiency and speed. Next one is focuses on results, which, as we know, leaders and executives are very much aware of these days. This is about work ethic, industriousness, and career is what the traits that make this up. And it's about a dedication to hard work and essentially getting the job done. And lastly, drives achievement, which is made up of traits: drive, people's drive, competition, and self-realization. So this is about the competitiveness and desire to succeed at all costs. So these competencies are necessary on a team that wants to be able to demonstrate this rapid adaptiveness. These are the teams that leaders speak about in relation to, pivoting to a different business model or such.
So what we'd like to do to take all of this from a very abstract conversation to make it a whole bunch more real is to maybe work through a bit of an exercise, or to have you work through a bit of an exercise. So what you're seeing on this slide is the data for a team, a 6-person team. This team's mandate overall is migrating from SharePoint to SharePoint Online. So 2 aspects of that: selecting the data for migration and archiving legacy data, and then gaining, upwards of 90% adoption at go live. And what you see on the right-hand side is all of the behavioral competencies for this team. So essentially there are 29 of them in total. Some of them that are about relationships, some about how the team solves problems, some about how it is productive, where its motivation comes from, the personal success of individuals, as well as some things related to organizational needs. And on the far right of this, you see a column that is in reds and greens and yellows, and that's essentially giving you the aggregated score of the assessments for these 6 people. So it tells you, for example, that in terms of building consensus, the aggregated score for the team is 30. Or for leading decisively under the motivation, the team's aggregated score is 61. So what you have here is this team's behavioral makeup. And what we'd like to do is to go into an exercise mode here, both at the tables in the restaurant and for those who are in breakout rooms. I believe that that a handout's been sent out to you. And what you have in that handout is a little bit of information on this exercise and the functionality that you're going to be assessing. So what you have on the first page of that handout is quickly what it is you're being asked to do, which is to look at this team's data and the functionality you are assessing, identify the competencies that make up the functionality, and then learn a little bit more about those competencies on the next 3 pages in the handout. And then to think about it and decide how effective do you think this team is going to be at demonstrating the functionality that you're being asked to assess. And on the very last page of the handout, there are a couple of questions in terms of what your conclusions and observations about the team, and maybe what you would recommend to the project manager of this team in terms of that particular functionality. How well are they going to be able to do this? Maybe I want to stop and ask if there are any questions before we go into breakout mode. What we're going to be doing essentially is giving you 7 minutes to have a look at things, read through them, give consideration to how you would like to assess the team, and then to come back and have an opportunity for us to hear from you what you think.
I think, Matt, I think we can give people 10 minutes because we're at 8:19 right now. So I think we have time. Is that okay?
Yep, that works for us.
Okay. I mean, we want to make sure people have enough time. It's kind of hard
Yes.
from not seeing anybody, really.
So I
Kind
think
of.
the question is, are we still splitting it up by the 2 categories, or?
Yeah,
Yes.
some for people on in breakout rooms, one functionality, a range, right? At a table, it's one functionality, one thing that they're going to be assessing, right? So they have an opportunity at the table to discuss what is it that they're seeing in the handout, what are they learning about the team. So
those online, Matt, you can divide it also, whichever, just as long as I suppose we have half and half.
yeah.
So do we have the people in person do lead and influence others, and the people on Zoom do significant change, or are we going to run through both individually?
Sure,
Yeah, we can do it that way. That's
we
fine.
can do it that way.
If that's
Okay.
easy, sure.
Yeah, I think that's easier. So
No problem.
everyone virtually, if you want to go off of the bring about a significant change handout, and here at the restaurant, we'll do lead and influence others. So our outbriefs will be unique.
Okay.
Okay. Virtual people should be going in their breakout room here in a minute. 1 second.
So I'm not going to a breakout room, Germaine.
Okay.
Guys. And hopefully the instructions were okay. If there were issues with the instructions, maybe you can let Matt know, and afterwards it's valuable information for us, so we can change it for next time. So do we want to start the readout? Let's go ahead with the tables at the restaurant.
Sure. So again, we took to lead and influence others. So we'll start with our first table rep.
And since I was the only person who was able to read the screen, I was selected to be my representative. So the team in question is required to lead and influence others, and we're given 5 competencies to assess them along. And we painstakingly located those competencies. Builds consensus and demonstrates character are highly rated in the score table. Initiates independently is more or less. And then they're not really very good at promoting compelling vision and seeking innovation. So our reading of this team for this particular task, leading and influencing others, is that on their own, as they are with these competencies, they will not be very good. So our recommendation is that they possibly would need a strong leader of the team, a project manager, or maybe there is a strong leader on the team who needs to be elevated, who would be able to think strategically, have vision and articulate that vision to the team and push the team in the right direction, so that the strengths that this team exhibits, like building consensus and demonstrating character, could be used for them to be early adopters of the behavior as a demonstrating character, and then building consensus around them. It was not also clear to us whether consensus meant consensus on the team or consensus around the team. But either way, adopting those behaviors, and even though they can't innovate themselves, if there is a strong leader who can suggest innovative vision, they could show example and lead by example, so that then there's a multiplying effect down the road. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Did any tables have any alternate views? Okay.
Really?
Okay. So Ms. Canty will go off to the virtual, since I think that was pretty much our consensus for this exercise.
So let's talk just for a moment about that one before we kind of head to the next group. So in terms of the lead and influence, you're right overall to say that this group was probably going to struggle with this aspect. Their ability to really kind of carry the idea, if we want to move from, SharePoint to SharePoint online, that promoting vision, not very strongly held in their view that this is an important thing, or being able to do sort of we'll call it the iterative innovative thinking about how could they maybe get people interested and online with this. And even with the initiating independently being mid-range, they're not really particularly wanting to do, we'll call it the lead and influence piece. The consensus building really means that they're looking to harmonize. They do want to listen to others and create a very democratic sort of experience, and to be very trustworthy, which is great. But from so in terms of connecting with people in a trusted sort of way, yes, and probably hearing from people, yes, but then taking the other half of the equation in terms of how do we now push forward with a view of maybe introducing a new solution, something that's going to be a benefit to the organization. That's where people then were not really bringing the strength to be able to do that piece well. So odds are for this group, it was going to take quite a long while to be able to do that initial, let's get everybody on board who needed to be on board to make a decision that, yes, this is the right direction for us to go. So your assessment was correct. So let's, any questions about that before we move to the virtual?
We should be back.
I didn't quite hear that.
Yep. So if we want to go, one of the virtual spokespersons, if you guys want to go with your exercise.
Do we have a volunteer?
I'll go from breakout room 4. Maybe it was just us. Maybe we weren't quite following the game plan here, but when we got put into the breakout rooms, we could not see your slide any longer that contains the scores.
Oh,
So we were at a loss. We were basically stuck head in the water.
Okay, well.
So were we.
Same for group 6. Yep.
Okay, I didn't know if the other breakout rooms somehow.
No, that probably happened with all the breakout rooms then. That was a technology thing. At least I didn't know it would do that. That you would not have any means of seeing things.
We
Okay.
had a creative member on our team who somehow took a screenshot of it ahead of time and shared it. So we were able to assess one thing, but that's it. It took us a long time to get set up.
Okay, well, I apologize for the fact that you didn't have half the equation to do this, to do this task. So maybe we can do it a little bit, sort of looking at things right now. So why don't you kind of start by telling everyone, since it sounds like all the different kind of breakout groups didn't know which competencies we were looking at. So maybe we can do some of this a little bit together. So which one do you want to look at first on your list?
Okay, well, I guess since I spoke up to begin with, I'll just keep rolling with it then. Again, just working off of this worksheet you gave to us, I guess the first competency is embraces change.
Okay. So when you're looking at embraces change as part of the productivity, right? And so they have sort of a mid-range score in terms of being flexible, taking risk, and being willing to delegate things to others and understand that there's going to be some variability when other people kind of do a task. They might do it a little different, right? So they can flex a bit with that sort of ambiguity and not hold up the bus and not micromanage too much. Okay.
Okay. Then the next one was drives achievement.
So their drives achievement is 65. They're raring to go in terms of really wanting to push and being unwilling to kind of take second place, right? They have a very strong desire to come out on top, to make it work.
All right. Let's see, then next one is leads decisively.
So that's actually also part of a motivational competency set. And this is really about power assertion and the willingness to make a decision. So take control of situations, push for what it is that they want, and to make the decisions about what's in and what's out. So combining that achievement orientation and that decisiveness, they become an unstoppable force.
Okay. All right. Next one is promotes compelling vision.
So the compelling vision piece is overall looking again, it's part of the motivational grouping. So that's mid-range. It's about purpose and setting longer horizon goals and a sense of wanting to fulfill potential. So yeah, so a mid-range score.
All right. And then the final one is thrives in chaos.
And as Geri explained that one earlier, this is really about the quintessential agile competency, probably in terms of being able to work efficiently, multitask, make use of every bit of time available, and having the desire to be on the go, like just keep moving. So when you combine those competencies, how do you think that this team would do at this aspect of things?
Well, just for me, I overall, I thought not too well. Again, we couldn't do anything as a group in the breakout room, but as soon as I got back to the main room here, I found these 5 different scores that you just went through. I added them up, divided by 5. The average was 56. That puts them kind of in the middle range, the yellow area. And the functionality that we were to assess is the project team is required to bring about a significant change. And the one behavioral competency, what they were scored on, is embraces change. And they only had a 50 on that. So that was kind of even on the low side. So my own assessment is no, they're not going to do very well in bringing about change. So that's one of their weaknesses, kind of.
Okay. So when we look at, go ahead.
I'm actually leading this project for a institute over at NIH.
Yeah.
We're moving 100 sites of all sizes and shapes. And I was thinking their strengths and weaknesses happen to be in the right place for this exact need, that their weaknesses didn't really matter that much on this exact project. So I think their strengths were in the areas that you need on this, and their weaknesses were kind of like they might be a total disaster on another project, but on this project it wasn't going to be too bad. So I thought they'd do all right.
I mean, this is a group overall that's very likely to be definitely be mobilized, be very quick moving, be pretty responsive, and very, very resolute in their determination to want to come out on top, to get it across the finish line. They're going to push that very hard. Between that decisiveness, which is at 60, so it's pretty strong, that leading decisively, and recognizing the embraces change is sort of mid-range, they could probably by times be a little bit steamroller in forcing their way, right? In terms of get the job done the way we think it should get done. If the embraces change was a little stronger, a little higher, they probably do it in a somewhat more engaged delegating way. But otherwise, they probably would roll forward with this in a pretty no nonsense kind of way. They may not, though, do going back to the team in the earlier groups and look at things from a consensus building perspective, some of that empathy, patience, cooperation, they may be pretty oblivious to whether or not people actually, people felt like they were heard, people felt like they were included, like their concerns were being considered. They go, no, not really at 30, right? They're not a team necessarily that would be listening. The innovation piece would also suggest at 35 that overall, probably once they kind of get glued to their first sort of conclusion, or this is the approach we're taking, they might be less adaptive than what would be good, and creative in their solving of problems as they rolled forward with it. So they might initially not do such a great job in terms of getting people saying, yeah, okay, let's make the migration. And then they would be hard driving, but possibly leaving a few dead bodies in the ditch on the way. That's what potentially would probably happen.
And just to add to that, I mean, the low scores around being able to influence and the building consensus and everything, that is, we see today causing stress in organizations for those that are resisting the change that organizations want to happen. So we can see here, if the project team is not meeting people where they're at, if they're not patient with those that need more time to actually make the change, and if they're not working on building that consensus and making the connection with people, then they are going to receive resistance from people. So, and that causes stress for people. So just to be aware of that also.
So the point out of all of this is to say that when we look at, and I did see one comment in the chat here about the darkness, that this was hard to see, and I apologize for that. What you start to see out of this, it's a little bit like playing the piano. You can start to really look at and ask yourself questions about when you have the aggregated data on the team, what is this team going to be able to handle well? How are these behavioral preferences going to work together? The good news for this team is high humor and a pretty high relationship orientation and some of that political influencing piece. So they will push for some of their way in a humorous sort of approach. But then if they run into something, they will just probably kind of push past it. They won't necessarily slow down and do the initial listening and trying to make sure that people are on board before they get going. So you can pose different questions to this kind of data and start asking and understanding really for yourself, what is this team going to do? How well are they going to handle different aspects of this? And you can ask it in terms of, how mobilized is this? It's motivational competencies, which overall are pretty high in this grouping. you know, how productive and what type of productivity. Is it very speed oriented and that kind of, is it quality oriented? Is it nail things down, be organized and accountable oriented? Maybe is it financial viability oriented? You can get a read on what the balance there is very quickly. You can get an understanding of what kinds of problems is it likely to handle well and which one's not. So the team is very good at handling the critical reasoning, handling the data, understanding and recognizing those kinds of concrete patterns. But the team will not do as well when it comes to some of the more abstract thinking, the complexity piece potentially. And when it really comes down to saying, let's come up with truly novel ideas, it's probably going to circle back to saying more with, but what does the data tell me? If a new idea comes up, somebody will probably knock it down with, but you don't have proof, but you don't have proof, which is in many ways the most destructive thing you can do with a new idea.
So on this one, I thought one of the ones that they're going to do really well on is the chaos.
Yep.
They had a high score on that, and
Absolutely.
that one, when you've got like one site's worth of people, is like they're still trying to figure out, oh, you know, do we want to migrate it or just archive it, or do we want to, who all's on our team and who's going to double check it? It's like, I think the dealing with chaos and their flexibility of like, okay, well, let's move on to the next one while those people are waiting and work on another one that I think they'd be able to juggle.
100% correct. 100% correct. They're going to be able to do that and not lose their own bearings, right? As that kind of, oh, it's changing the queue. Somebody else has to come in, fill the gap because we got that time and keep things moving. They will flex and flow well that way. Absolutely.
So I think we're time-wise, we're running a little late, Germaine. So I was going to go on to the next slide.
Yep.
Did you have something you wanted to add, or did anybody have a question?
No, it was really just that. It's really just to say you can kind of, you know, really look at and understand what's happening with the team.
Just a minute, we had one question in the restaurant. So.
Okay.
Where is the data on the team coming from? I'm familiar with Clifton Strengths Finder. Is it an assessment like that? It
is an assessment. It is an assessment called Success Finder in this particular case. So it is it's actually a premium quality predictive analytic, behavioral analytic. It's been around for almost 40 years in evolution. And when Geri was explaining some of the competencies, you know, for example, sustains profitability, or even what you saw on the chart here, it's really a model that works with 120 variables. So it's the most intensive of its kind in terms of understanding the trait preferences of the individuals. So in this case, the team members completed the assessment and then their information was rolled up in relation to these 29 competencies. And then we're able to look at and aggregate those 29 competencies for the team and say, what is this team really likely to be able to do? So it does come from a very high quality tool. And then how do you we were able to pull that information together and say, what does this really tell us about this team?
And the focus is on work. It's work related, the competencies.
Yeah, so the entire assessment from that perspective is an instrument that is designed to help people understand for themselves who are they, their suitability for different types of work, both from an interest and a trait suitability perspective, and also for decision makers to be able to say, you know, who do I have in front of me and what do their preferences, both interest and their trait, their behavioral preferences, what does that tell me about what they're going to do well and maybe what they're going to struggle with? And if we take the strengths of individuals and we say we've got multiple strengths and we kind of bring those together, it gives even that much more emphasis to a particular type of behavior in a team. Or conversely, if I have low preferences amongst many people in a team, that amplifies a blind spot for that group. So it's possible when you aggregate the data to really predict what is this group together going to do well? What are they going to focus on a lot? And what are they going to tend to ignore, no matter how much you might try to point them in that direction? And the reality is that, you know, a project manager, truth be told, cannot compensate for a significant blind spot on a team. Like, they're not going to be able to really balance that out. Or for that matter, if there is a really high preference that might be existing in the team that really isn't terribly beneficial necessarily for what this group needs to be delivering, again, the project manager per se is not going to be able to be sufficient counterbalance to that. So typically we look at not just what the team membership and their preferences are, but in fact also including the project manager to help the project manager understand, why is some of this being such a wrestle for me? Why are some things working so well and other things being so hard? Why does that happen? Yeah. So I am mindful of the time thing. We are kind of messing this a little bit. So this really kind of a last slide in terms of, you know, what is it really that that any project manager can do if their team is struggling, right? You know, what's really needed in essence is the ability to say, what functionalities do I require, you know, based on the mandate of the team? And you can think of that in part about, you know, are we in a strategizing piece? Do we have a connecting with a customer kind of piece? Do we have a, you know, we have to design something new and different? Do we have to, right? There's different pieces, typically chunks to the work where particular behavioral preferences are leaned on more. So it's a way of defining what those functionality requirements are, and then really understanding, what do I have for behavioral strengths and blind spots in my aggregate? Because when I look at that and line those things up, it tells me, where is this going to work easily and where is this going to be a very difficult road? And if I have, you know, misalignments between the requirement and what I have behaviorally coming to the table, I have a few options, but not in truth that many. I can try to raise the team's awareness and say, we're going to build some kind of a process to help us around it. So I have a bunch of people who don't think about the money side. So I try to do a budget process, and we have to do variance reporting and do some things like that. But the reality is, it's never anywhere near as strong as if I have that money mindedness naturally in the group, for example. Maybe by times I can choose to augment the team to say, I'm going to bring a certain capacity in when I need it to strengthen that behaviorally in the group. Or sometimes if it's really a critical piece, I may need to really ask myself, do I need to change some of my composition? Am I putting myself critically in danger of not being able to follow through with this and deliver what I need to? I mean, those are really the steps that we can take, or we can try to make our way, you know, through this, but recognizing what the struggle is going to be. Right? So it's really, in a way, what this enables project managers to know, either going into it or if they're already in the circumstance, to be able to understand it and say, now, what can I do here? Can I do some coaching with the individual team members? Can I increase the collective awareness of how we are a bit hobbled, and what are we going to do to help ourselves here so we don't risk failure? Yeah, trying to raise collective competency to a new level of awareness. Yeah. So anything else you'd want to add to that, Geri?
I think you've covered it all. I think from a project manager perspective, I know myself that if I had been aware of what I'm aware of today in relation to working with this tool, that projects would have been much easier if I had been able to change the composition of my team, or even building the awareness that this is a blind spot for the team. But I think it gives project managers another way of being successful by having the right team with the right propensities on their team in order to get the work done, that they match the mandate. whether it's a strategy mandate, whether it's implementation of SharePoint, the mandate and having the right people is what's important.
All right, well, ladies, we greatly appreciate so much of your expertise and your preparations that went into tonight. A round of applause both here at the restaurant and virtually. They're willing to share, to have you use both the handouts and the presentation deck for your professional use, but not your commercial use. So we'll have links to their website to reach out to them. I think a lot of this data would be good for a half a day or all day workshop because there's a lot of information in an hour. So keep them in mind as you look at your training budgets for both fiscal year 22 and calendar year 22. But we can't thank you guys enough. And I think you've really changed our thought in terms of how we look at team development and team strengthening and using data.
Thank you
Well,
so
thank you
much.
for having us. It's been an interesting experience trying to do it this way. So thank you for being patient. And I do apologize for the breakout groups that, yeah, I didn't realize that that's how the technology does this. So a learning for me, a learning for us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
No, I was just going to follow up what Germaine said and thanking everybody. It was